Hi, welcome to our presentation on the ins and outs of Zoom. Today we will be covering how to schedule and start meetings in Zoom, privacy and security settings, and then reviewing all the in-meeting setting options you have. We'll also be going into the web browser login for Zoom to show you extra settings on there, and basically just doing a major rundown of everything you can do on this application.
So Zoom is really great for hosting large group calls or any kind of webinar. So you can have, I believe it's up to 100 people in your Zoom call. So that's really good for some of those big meetings and presentations. It's really good for interactive meetings. The call quality and the video quality is quite good. So that makes it a lot easier to be able to interact with people without having your connection drop, especially with higher group volumes. And then there are also multiple view options. So if you guys have seen the little video previews, there's different ways to kind of uh, show the different members of your video call, so you can kind of see everyone at once or just the speaker. So it has a lot of really good features like that to make sure you see everyone in your call. So in terms of some of the cons, so there are some features that aren't accessible to all users. So the example given here is the virtual background. So you'll notice all of the volunteers in this Zoom call, we do have this this cyber seniors background on, but you'll also see that it doesn't always work 100% because I'm not in front of a green screen. And so for certain people, depending on your video quality, it might just not work for you at all. So that's something to keep in mind. It does have quite a few features, and while on the one hand that is good, depending on how much you want to customize your meeting, that can be kind of more complicated if you just kind of want to set up a basic meeting. There also are some security and data protection issues, which I was alluding to earlier. So you do need to be aware of certain things like Zoom bombing, which is basically when unauthorized users get into your Zoom meeting and send photos or share screens that you really don't want to be seeing when you're in the middle of a meeting. There are ways to mitigate that, so we will discuss that. And you do also need to be careful about keeping your data safe. I think that kind of universally applies to any software, but certainly that's something that we're going to touch on as well. So if you're concerned about anything such as Zoom having access to your Facebook contacts, then you just want to make sure you're not connecting Facebook or Google or whatever other accounts you have to Zoom. So we'll touch on that more later. So in terms of the features, so as I'd mentioned, group video calls have a maximum of 100 participants, which I think for most people's purposes is quite enough. If we're talking about the free or the basic plan for Zoom, you can have unlimited one-on-one meetings. So there's no time limit for how long that meeting can be. But something to keep in mind, if you have any kind of group video call and you're just on the free Zoom, there is a limit of 40 minutes on that meeting. Another feature that Zoom has is screen sharing, like what I'm doing right now. So I can share either a window on my screen. So right now I'm just sharing PowerPoint with you guys. I could also share a whole screen if I want to show you kind of what I'm doing on my desktop. So it's really useful for that, especially if you need tech support or something. Zoom can be a really good tool for something of that nature. There's also the option of breakout rooms, which is something we'll also be, I guess, firsthand kind of experiencing today when we get to the Q&A session. So breakout rooms are basically just if you have one big meeting, you can break out into smaller meetings to say have discussions or Q&A sessions. So that's another really useful feature of Zoom. Additionally, Zoom does work on Apple and Android devices as well as computers. So you can use Zoom on your phone, you can use it on your desktop, laptop, your iPad, what have you. It's quite versatile in that sense. And you can also use Zoom without actually downloading it. So you can use it within the browser rather than downloading the program itself. So that's just an outline of some of the features. So in terms of downloading Zoom, so as I did mention, you can use Zoom in your internet browser, but you are limited on some of the features that you can access when you do it that way. So it is better to download it if you have the capability. So to get Zoom, you go to the, I guess okay, there's the link. So the link at the bottom here, zoom.us/download. Once you go to that site, you'll see this download center here. So you go ahead and click the download link. That should initiate a download. So if you're on a Windows computer, you'll download an exe file. and just follow the prompts to get that installed. It's a pretty straightforward installation process. If you're using Zoom not on a desktop or laptop, but on a mobile device, then either access the Google Play Store if you're on a Samsung or Android phone, or access the Apple App Store and download it there. Either way, that Zoom logo should look the same on either of those stores, so just go ahead and install that. All right, so that's just how to download Zoom, but in terms of signing into Zoom, you will need to create an account. So once you've downloaded it, you'll have this sign in option, or if you don't already have a sign in, you'll have the sign up option. So to initiate a sign up, you just click the sign up free button and it'll take you to a web page where it'll allow you to go through that process. So you could create your own separate account, or you can also log in via your Google account or your Facebook account and link those to your Zoom. Just a word of caution there though, if you are concerned about any kind of security issues or your information being shared with Zoom, then it would be better to just create your own account and not sign in through Google or Facebook. All right, so once you've signed into Zoom on the home page, you will see, or rather the program itself, you'll see these options here. So in the top left corner, that orange button is to create a new meeting. So if you want to be the host of a meeting, you would select that particular icon. And it's pretty straightforward. You'll get a link basically to send people to invite them to your meeting. You can also schedule, or not schedule, rather, you can also send that meeting via email to people. The second icon to the right there, join. So if someone else is hosting the meeting, you can go ahead and join that existing meeting. So either they'll give you a URL that you click, or they'll give you an ID, a meeting ID that you'll plug in there. In the lower left-hand corner, we see the schedule button. So rather than immediately starting a meeting, which is what you do with that orange new meeting button, the schedule button allows you to schedule a meeting for a specific time. So especially if it's a recurrent meeting or you're just scheduling ahead for work or what have you, you can set all those details up there in the schedule meeting button for later. And just a quick note as well. So we're looking right now at Zoom. It looks like it's on, I guess, a Mac here. So this would be what the screen looks like on your computer device. It might look slightly different on a mobile screen, but the icons should be the same. So just look at the icons themselves. All right. So going into a little bit more detail here. So if we click the new meeting button, so again, this is to immediately schedule, or rather immediately start a meeting. So to do this, so once you've clicked that button, you can invite participants to your meeting, and either you copy the meeting ID. Hold on, this doesn't have it all here on this screen. Okay, I guess will we do a live demo after this, just to kind of show this in more detail?
Yeah,
okay.
we can, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm going by this screen rather than the actual Zoom software on the side here, but at any rate, so once you've started that new meeting, you can copy the meeting ID and send it to whoever you're trying to invite into your meeting. Or you can copy the invite link and send that via text message, via email, what have you. There is also an option to send it via email. So Zoom will initiate that for you. You just plug in whoever you're trying to invite it to. If you click join meeting, so this would be if you're joining someone else's meeting that's already been initiated. So either you need to put in a meeting ID, which they will have to send you, or you put in a personal link name that someone, again, will have sent you. So you can join via one or the other. Most people use a meeting ID, but for some people, this meeting link name, it's just basically a static meeting link name that they use across all of their meetings. So they might use that instead. But at any rate, you put in one or the other and hit join. One thing to note is on this screen here, you'll see that I have an option to not connect to audio and to turn off my video. So if you want to join a meeting and not have your face be up on the screen, then you can go ahead and click turn off my video. Similarly, if you're joining a meeting with a lot of people that are already in there and you don't want to make a whole lot of noise, you can click don't connect to audio. So those are just two options that it gives you upon or prior to joining that meeting. And you can reconnect via the audio and video later. So this is just the default setting when you join the meeting. All right, so schedule. So as I was mentioning before, join meeting is, or sorry, start a meeting is to immediately start it. Schedule is to schedule a meeting for later. So to do so, you would click that schedule button, and then you can go ahead and fill out some of the details that we see on the right-hand side here. So you can give like a topic for your meeting. You can set the specific date and time, and from the start time to the end time. You can also note if this is a recurring meeting that's meant to happen, say, every week. So the meeting ID here, you can either generate automatically and it'll just be a randomly generated ID, or you can set it to use your personal meeting ID, which I believe is static across all of your meetings. This option here, password. So this is actually a really good setting, especially if you want to kind of add some security and privacy to your meeting. So if you select require meeting password, you can require that anyone joining your meeting puts a specific password in. I believe that it automatically generates one that it'll display on the screen. And I believe you can also customize it as well. Yeah, so when you select that, it'll give you the option either customize it or use the randomly generated one. So just make sure you pass that along to whoever's trying to join. Then we have this little video section here. So you can set, as the host of this meeting, you can set your video to start as being off. And likewise, you can set your participants' video to default to being off as well, or on, whichever you prefer. Same exact thing with the audio, but there is one other little added detail. You can allow people to connect via either telephone audio, computer audio, or both. So one little quick thing to note, because I was actually trying to set this up today for another meeting to have it be that people could call in rather than use their computer audio. It seems that Zoom has removed this for free basic users at the moment, so that might change in the future, but just something to note, you might not be able to connect via telephone audio right now. Typically the way that works though is if you do allow people to connect via telephone audio, they get a number that they call, they have to call that number, put in the meeting ID, and then basically connect through that way. But like I said, that seems to be unavailable at the moment for free users. They did put a little notification on my account that said they might be taking that out just due to high volume of calls through Zoom at the moment. But yeah, so anyway, that was the audio section. And then lastly, there's this option at the bottom with the calendar. So if you have a particular calendar that you use, so say for example, you're on your iPhone and you use iCal, or you're on your Android device and use Google Calendar or Outlook or what have you, you can select that option there and it'll add it to your calendar for you so that you don't forget that meeting that you just scheduled. So that was kind of an overview there. So there are some other advanced settings, and mostly these are pertaining to adding security to your Zoom call. So we have a few here that we suggest. So number one, and what you guys have seen coming into this particular Zoom call, we do have a waiting room. So what that does is anyone who is a host of the meeting can see who's in the waiting room requesting access to your Zoom call and can either allow them in or not. So that is good for preventing some of those Zoom bombs. So basically people would get a hold of these Zoom IDs and try and get into your call, and they can't join if you don't let them in, kind of thing. So it's a really good way of preventing that. So we do suggest that you enable the waiting room, and that would be an option when you're scheduling your meeting there at the bottom. So just to go back real quick. Yeah, you see those advanced options at the bottom. If you select that, you'll get this kind of this menu pop up that'll allow you to select some of these. So enable waiting room is a good idea. It's a good idea to also disable join before host. So all that does is if you haven't yet started your meeting, so say I'm the host of the meeting, I scheduled it for 1 p.m. tomorrow, and I'm not there in the meeting yet, other people could join before me, so they could just basically already be in the meeting by the time I get there. So it's a good idea to disable that so that you can kind of control who's coming into your meeting. And then lastly, enabling the mute participants on entry is also a good choice. And that's just so that people kind of can turn their audio on rather than coming in guns blazing, being noisy. So that's a good one to that's a good one to have enabled as well. All right, so once you've put all of those settings in, you can go ahead and click schedule. And as I said, that should add to your calendar if you've specified one. And that's pretty much that for schedule. Okay, so with respect to inviting people to your scheduled meeting, so either you can go to this copy invitation, or sorry, I'll actually read through the slide rather than freeballing it. All right, so invite people to your meeting by going to the meeting tab at the top of the window. So if you have a particular meeting that you've scheduled, you click that meeting and then you can either hit copy invitation and send it to them by pasting it to an email or text message. Is there no option here to also email it to them?
I believe you'd have to connect it to your contact list, which I have not
Right.
done, so I don't have that
Okay.
option.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So if you, yeah, so for the most part, and this is mostly what I've been doing too anyway, just copy the invitation and email it to them is probably the simplest way, especially if you haven't connected your contact information to your Zoom account. So, all right. Sorry, some of this is getting blocked because there's somebody in the waiting room. There we go. I'll move that over. Okay, so let's look at some of the other Zoom buttons. So this is me in an actual call, basically. And you can see here in the top right corner that oh, actually, sorry, this is just showing us the difference between the computer and the mobile version. So as I was alluding to earlier, just keep in mind that your mobile Zoom versus the Zoom that you see on your computer will look slightly different, but there should be the same functionality and features. It's just they might be in a slightly different layout. So here we have on the computer versus on mobile. So just bear in mind all of the sort of options for things like joining audio, for sharing your video, all of those are at the bottom of your screen. And your option to leave the meeting on mobile versus on the PC, bear in mind that that has shifted places. So on the PC, your end meeting is in the bottom right-hand corner. On mobile, it's in the top right. So just pay attention to some of those little differences there. It can be a little bit confusing if you're used to using one version versus the other. So going through those buttons then, and we do have the computer and the mobile version here just so that it's a little bit easier to follow along. So if you want to start or stop your video, so all you have to do is click that little video icon there. And so if your video is already started, then that'll stop it and vice versa. Now, in terms of the video settings, there is that little upward facing arrow next to the camera button. So if you click that, you do get these options here. So you can select which camera, for example, that you're sharing. So, sorry, someone's audio is just cutting in there. Okay, I think we're good. Yeah, so you can select which camera is basically being shared with the meeting. So if you have multiple cameras, that's something to pay attention to. Or if you're not seeing any cameras appear, like for example, your webcam, then perhaps that hasn't been set up properly. So additionally, this is where you can choose a virtual background. So underneath that select camera, we see this choose a virtual background option there. And if you click that, you can go ahead and essentially add a background like the one I have right now. Again, if you don't have a green screen, it's not the best, but it does work admirably well, all things considered. And then lastly, there's also additional settings that you can tweak using that video settings button at the very bottom. So that was just a quick overview of the stop or of the video options. We also have this microphone here, which allows you to either mute yourself or unmute yourself and share your audio. So that's just a comparison of the desktop versus the mobile version. So once again, if you click that upward facing arrow, you will be given the different sound settings. So at the very top here, similar to the videos, to selecting a video, you can select your microphone. So you might have multiple options there depending on if you have multiple microphones. You can also select what the audio is outputting to, so what your speakers are. Once again, that might differ if you have multiple speaker setups, or in my case, I have headphones versus my inbuilt speakers. And then as well, you also have the option to test your speaker and microphone. So if you're not sure if your audio is working, you're not sure if people will be able to hear you, you can go ahead and click that option. It'll allow you to not only test your microphone, but also to test your headset or your speakers and see if they're adequately working. And then there are more audio settings at that very bottom there, so you can click that and tweak those around too. All right, so this here, this gallery view, so you'll see it as gallery view on your desktop, and it's called speaker view, I believe, on mobile. So if you click that, the gallery view is basically going to give you all of the participants in the chat at once. So in this group of 100, that might be a little bit excessive. If you want to just see who's speaking, then you can click on speaker view instead. So I typically pick speaker view because sometimes it's kind of disorienting when I just see everyone at once. And if you're actually having a conversation with them, you're usually looking at whoever is speaking. So speaker view is a really good setting to click on there. Oh, and then there's note at the bottom here. So when you're on your mobile device, you can get different views by just swiping right or left. So you can switch it from gallery view to, say, speaker view, for example, if you just swipe. Additionally, while on mobile, most people's phones have a front facing and a back camera. So if you want to switch which one is being used, then you just click this little camera icon with the with those swirly arrows there, and that'll switch between front versus back camera. But again, that's only for mobile devices, so something to keep in mind. All right, so if you are hosting a Zoom meeting, you have the option to manage participants. So when you're in a meeting, you should have this little button that you can click that says Manage Participants. And if you click More next to a participant's name, so you'll get the list of participants, you can select More at that point. And you have the option to say start or stop their video or mic. You can make someone a host or a co-host. So if they are a host or a co-host, they essentially have more permissions within the meeting. So they can also do this, for example, assigning different co-hosts or muting or allowing people in from the waiting room, for example. You can also remove people from your meeting using this Manage Participants menu as well. So just keep in mind, if you're not the host, you don't have any of this functionality, but you can still click that button and see who is in the call. So you can just view the participants. You don't have that option to say more and then, you know, mute them or what have you. All right, and then another great feature of Zoom, as I was mentioning before, is screen sharing. So essentially, when you share your screen, other people can see what is on your screen, what you're looking at. So if you click that button, you can decide at what point or what exactly you want to share in your screen. So either you can share the whole screen. So this first option here that says desktop 1, that's basically going to show your whole screen, anything you open on it. If you just want to show someone, say, in my case, I just wanted to show you guys PowerPoint, I actually had the option to just select PowerPoint, and you can only see that window. I could put anything else up on my computer and you can't see that. So it just kind of gives you some options as to what you want to share. And if you have 2 monitors, you could also just share 1 monitor versus the other. This is also available on mobile devices. I actually haven't played around with it on there, but I assume that the configuration would be similar. So you can kind of select what you want to share, or at least maybe it's just the whole screen on your mobile. So if you are the host, once again, you kind of have a little bit more permissions here. You can change some of these screen sharing options. So you could say, decide who gets to share a screen. So maybe you only want yourself to be able to share a screen. So you can click the upward facing arrow next to the screen share button and change some of these settings. So for example, I could have it be such that only 1 participant can share their screen at a time, or I could select multiple participants can share simultaneously. If you click the advanced sharing options, it takes you into the screen in the bottom right-hand corner. So once again, you can kind of specify the single versus multiple participants, and then you can also set who is actually allowed to share. So for example, I could say that me as the host, I'm the only one who can share my screen, or you can open it up to all participants. So that's a good thing to keep in mind for security purposes, especially if there's just kind of anyone can join your meeting. Might not be a bad idea to limit who can share their screen. All right, so breakout rooms. So as I was mentioning earlier, this is something we'll be doing when we get to our Q&A session. So these breakout rooms allow you to split up your big meeting into kind of multiple smaller rooms. So you can click that button. Again, this is as a host or someone with host privileges. You click that breakout rooms button and it will take you into this menu on the right here. So you can assign a certain number of participants to a room. You can either do that automatically or manually. So if you select automatically and say, I don't know, 3 participants per room, then it'll divvy up your meeting into groups of 3 automatically. Alternatively, you could do that manually and kind of assign people to specific rooms. You can always add more rooms as well. So say, for example, you've created your breakout rooms, then you decide that you actually want another breakout room, for example. There's that button there that says add a room. So you can go ahead and click that and assign whomever you wish to that room. So something to keep in mind as well, when you do create these breakout rooms, it doesn't automatically send everyone to them. You actually have to open all rooms. So you'll see that option, the bottom right-hand corner there. Right now it's grayed out, but you'll have an option to open all rooms and allow people to join those breakout rooms, or they'll move to them automatically. They'll be prompted basically a yes or no and move there accordingly. So you will be experiencing that later today. All right, so back to the talk of security. So you can also adjust some of your security settings when you're already in a meeting. And to do that, you click that security button right there. It kind of looks like a shield. So in that screen, so in that screen, you can lock a meeting, for example. So say you don't want anyone else to join your meeting. You can go ahead and click that button and no new participants can enter. You can also do things such as enable or disable waiting rooms. So as I was mentioning previously, it is a good idea to have waiting rooms if maybe you forgot to make that one of your settings when you created the, when you initially created the meeting. Fear not, you can still add them back after the fact. So you can go ahead and enable them using this security feature here. And then you can also modify things like allowing or disallowing participants to share screen, to participate in chat, and to rename themselves. So if it's got a little check mark beside it, that means that they are allowed to do that. So you can kind of play around with those settings as well. There's also this button called reactions. So as of the moment, there's just 2 reactions that you can have in Zoom, and that's either this clapping hands emoji or a thumbs up. So all that does, if you select one of those, is it just displays it basically on your video, or on, if you don't have a video running, basically on your little name, and the host can see that. Just a quick note though, if you are on mobile, you won't see this reactions button. It's actually located under more on the mobile app. So just bear that in mind. All right, and then the chat feature. So you can participate in text chat if, say, you're not on video and not on voice. You go ahead and click that chat button at the bottom of your screen and type in whatever message you want, and it'll send it to the whole group. Just a quick note, you can also message either the whole group or message someone privately, but the host can see the private messages if they've recorded the meeting or basically after the meeting kind of thing. So just bear that in mind. And then we have the record meeting button. So this is if you want to record your meeting for later viewing. So if you click on that button, you have the option of either recording it to your computer or recording it to the cloud. So if you record it to your computer, it'll save it to your local files. If you record it to the cloud, then it will save it to the Zoom server. So on your Zoom account, you'll be able to look at this later. You can then download it from your Zoom account from the cloud through the web portal, which we will look at shortly. All right, you can leave a meeting before it officially ends, or if you are the host, you can end a meeting using that end meeting button. Now on the computer, it should be at the bottom of the screen in the right-hand corner. On mobile, it's the top right. So just bear that in mind. And then we also have these accessibility settings, which apparently I guess is a new feature in Zoom. So these settings are enabled by going through the Zoom portal, which we'll be taking a look at shortly. So essentially you go to the zoom.us website, you go into preferences, and there is an accessibility tab within that. So you can turn on things like closed captioning. You can also set it so that it'll always show your meeting controls, and you can adjust the chat display size. Now, I'm curious.
Actually,
if anyone's...
a clarification on this. It's actually, sorry, maybe I didn't, it's in the Zoom, if you're on your desktop in the Zoom, like when you look at like where it says, like usually says like the application name, like if you're in Word, it will say Word, then File. It actually says Zoom US up there, and that's where the preferences are.
All right, so there are different plans for Zoom now. Most people are just using the free version, which is fine. There are some limitations on the free version. As I was saying earlier, there are limits of how long you can be in a meeting if you have a group meeting. So you have unlimited one-on-one meetings, but any more than that, any more participants than that rather, it's a limit of 40 minutes per group meeting. So there are some less features there. I was also mentioning you can't call in right now. You can't use like you can't telephone into meetings using the basic version, but for any kind of subscription that should still be available. So yeah, these are just kind of the different prices and what some of the additional features are. For a casual user, you should be fine just sticking with the basic version, but in case you're using this more for work or other purposes, it's not bad to look into some of the other Zoom versions. So we're going to take a look now at the actual Zoom web portal. So this is where you can modify some additional settings for your meetings and for your account. So, okay, awesome. So this is the zoom.us website that you'll be taken to. So as you can see here, I am already logged in, but we're going to go to my account. So if I wasn't already logged in, you should have like a little login option there when you click on my account. All right, so once I'm in my account here, there's a couple things that I just wanted to show you guys. So we'll start with meetings. So that was just all my profile settings that you can go ahead and modify if you so wish. But under meetings, this is where you can do things such as schedule a meeting. You don't necessarily have to be in the Zoom software to do this. So for example, if I were to schedule a new meeting, I have those same options that I saw in Zoom in terms of assigning a topic, assigning when, assigning things like duration, whether it's recurring, et cetera, and all the options there. So I can actually go through the portal to do this rather than necessarily going through Zoom. It also gives you sort of, I guess, reference to previous meetings that you've been in if you wanted to take a look at that. Something to note as well, this personal meeting room option here. So everyone has kind of like a personal meeting room by default. You can give it a name and what have you. So that information is all here, and you can modify those settings here as well. So if I go ahead and edit this meeting, I can change things such as those meeting options that we were discussing earlier, such as enabling waiting rooms and everything else. So yeah, so all I've been clicking here, just to kind of go back a little bit. So under this left-hand side here, this menu, I'm currently on meetings. And I was just first showing you guys how to schedule a meeting there. Under upcoming meetings, you can also look at previous meetings that you've been involved with. You can look at your personal meeting room and kind of modify the default settings there for when you start a meeting. So rather than scheduling a meeting, if you just click start a meeting, I believe it takes you to your personal meeting room. And then there's also this option for meeting templates, which I have not played around with actually. So I don't know if anyone else can speak to whether or not that's...
Yeah. Meeting templates are used. So for example, I was doing let's say I'm doing French or English. Let's say I'm doing an English tech session for our cyber seniors. I don't want to rewrite the same meeting every single day. I write a meeting template and can start that meeting and name it, just add a word to it, but it would already have the same description and the same information, and you can change it however you feel fit. But
right.
The meeting template is basically a template of what you're going to use normally.
Yeah, so you would have scheduled a meeting, for example, and then you have an option to turn that into a meeting template. So that's kind of if you're creating a lot of meetings that would become more of use. So another screen we're going to look at here. So I'm going to click on recordings. So again, if you are, sorry, I'm just going to get rid of these because I don't need these warnings anymore. So if you are recording a meeting and you've saved it to the cloud, this is where those cloud recordings will appear. So again, you do need to be a paid subscriber to have access to the Zoom cloud, but you can always save it locally instead.
And Zoom Pro and the other subscriptions do not add. You have to pay additionally on top of that fee because it's an add-on package.
Okay, of course. So yes, so that would be something you'd have to pay for to really have access to that cloud recording. All right, and then below that recordings option there, we have settings. So this is where I can, for example, change my meeting settings. So for example, if I'm the host of a meeting, I could say to start meetings with my video on automatically, so I can change that default there. Likewise with participants. Sorry, Connor, you had something?
Sorry, so any setting that you change here will lock it on the Zoom app. So I would recommend do not touch host or participant video, because if you do, no one can change it if they're just joining a meeting. You have to go back in the web browser to get rid of it, because essentially turning it on blocks it. So the host can't change those settings.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Connor. I guess it would be likewise then for the audio type as well. Is all of this locking it on so that you can't change it through Zoom? Okay, so bear that in mind. Anything that you enable here is basically like locking it in for good. Well, I say for good. You have to go back to the portal to change it back if you so desire. So one thing of note as well, you do have this personal meeting ID, and I was mentioning earlier, you can either copy a link to your Zoom meeting or you can just use your personal meeting ID. So you can enable or disable having that personal meeting ID here. Don't know if there's anything else on here that we want to look at. There are quite a lot of settings.
They want to go over breakout rooms. If you go to the very bottom, I think it is.
Yeah. Meeting, here we go. Yeah, so as we were mentioning earlier, in order to use breakout rooms, you do have to enable them first through the Zoom portal. So again, once you're in the settings here, if you scroll down to this in-meeting advanced section, there is this option here to enable breakout rooms. So you actually have to enable that first in order to have that feature accessible.
And also, I'd turn on the allow host to assign participants before the meeting as well. It doesn't mean you have to. It's just and breakout, and it's only available at 4.5 or higher as well. And then just tap save, and then captions are also at the bottom as well. So if you want closed captioning, and you can also have it so it will save them. So we'll automatically save those captions in your recording as well if you turn it on.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So that'll now allow you to be able to use that in the Zoom program. So if you're ever looking for those breakout rooms and you can't seem to figure out how to start those, it's probably because you haven't enabled them yet through your portal. Okay. Anything else in here? Just because we're going on.
I don't think the sound they would go over much. Waiting room. It should automatically turn that on, but if it doesn't, turn that on. And show a join link from your browser. That's helpful if you're hosting with people that can't access the Zoom application. And yeah, right. That's helpful.
Yeah, because normally if you send someone a link to your Zoom meeting and they don't have Zoom, it basically prompts them to get Zoom. But if they want to view it in browser instead, this allows them to do that. But yeah, so there are a lot of options there. I'm just gonna go look at one last thing. Wait, where is it? Plans. I guess that's on. Oh, here we go. So this plans and pricing option at the top here will take you to the different Zoom plans. So if you did want to upgrade from basic to say pro, you can do that through this screen. So just something to keep in mind.
And finally, also, any Zoom page that you're on, you can always at the top tap schedule meeting, join a meeting, or host a meeting.
Yeah.
As well, which is helpful if you don't have the Zoom application and you want to host a meeting, for example.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll point out, if you're ever having any technical issues or you're not sure, you forget how to set up the breakout rooms, or you want to figure out how to get someone to telephone in, I found that their support is really good. So in the top right-hand corner, if you click support, it'll take you to their support center, and you can type in whatever question you have. If I wasn't sure about breakout rooms, I could type that in, for example. And they have quite good tutorials on how to set these things up. They'll even have videos and whatnot. So especially if there's anything that we couldn't get into a lot of detail today, check out that support center.